Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going way back in time,
Way back.
about 2,500 years,
Wow.
to ancient Persia,
Okay.
to explore the life of a king
All right.
who started as really nobody special
Yeah.
and rose to become the ruler of the largest empire
Oh,
the
wow.
world had ever seen, Darius the Great.
It's a story that's really fit for Hollywood.
You're not kidding.
Mm.
Full of political intrigue, daring, power plays.
Absolutely.
We're going to be using some really fascinating historical insights
Okay.
from a recent podcast with Professor Lloyd Llewellyn-Jones.
All right.
Now, most of us have probably heard of Darius
Yeah.
through the lens of the Greeks.
Right.
You know, like those famous battles like Marathon.
Uh-huh.
But what's really fascinating is that for Darius,
Yeah.
those Greek skirmishes were just a blip on the radar
Oh, wow.
compared to his vast ambitions further east.
That's right. To truly understand Darius, we need to shift our perspective.
Okay.
To see him not just as the adversary of the Greeks, but as a ruler who shaped an empire that stretched from India to Egypt.
Okay, so let's rewind to the beginning.
All right.
Darius wasn't born a prince.
Right.
He wasn't even in line for the throne.
No.
How did this guy go from being a spear bearer
Wow.
to the most powerful man in the world?
Well, it all started with a coup.
Oh.
The reigning king, Bardia,
Yeah.
wasn't exactly winning any popularity contests.
I see.
He decided to tax and seize land from the very elite
Wow.
who held power, the Persian Khans. Not a smart move.
I can imagine.
This sparked a rebellion orchestrated by a group of seven
so-
powerful Khans, including Darius.
Okay, so they take down the king.
Right.
Sounds like something straight out of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
But then what? Who gets to be the king?
That's where things get really interesting.
Oh, right.
According to the sources, Darius's claim to the throne was bolstered by a rather peculiar ritual
Really?
involving horses.
Horses?
We're talking about hippomancy,
Hippomancy.
which was basically an ancient form of divination using horses.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
So they're reading the future through horses. How did that work?
Imagine this. These powerful Khans,
Uh-huh.
each vying for the throne,
Yeah.
gathered their stallions.
Okay.
The ritual likely involved observing the horse's behavior,
I see.
maybe even having them race.
Oh, wow.
The stallion that showed the most strength or spirit
Yeah.
or some other auspicious sign
Okay.
would indicate which Khan was favored by the gods.
So it's like the Kentucky Derby meets ancient Persian mysticism?
You could say that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Darius's stallion emerged victorious,
Of course.
giving him a powerful claim to the throne,
Right.
backed by what was seen as divine approval.
Very smart move.
Yeah,
But even with the god seemingly on his side,
right.
did everyone just accept him as king?
Not at all.
Really?
Darius spent years putting down rebellions,
Oh, wow.
consolidating his power.
Yeah.
It was a brutal and messy business.
I can imagine.
Imagine trying to control an empire that stretches over thousands of miles
Yeah.
with different cultures,
Yeah.
languages,
Yeah.
and ambitions, all vying for their own piece of the pie.
That's a logistical nightmare.
It is.
So how did Darius deal with all these challenges?
Well, he had a few tricks up his sleeve.
Okay.
First, he knew that he had to legitimize his rule to connect himself to the legacy of previous kings.
Right.
So what did he do?
What?
He married every eligible female from the previous royal family.
Wow. Talk about solidifying your claim to the throne.
He did.
But I imagine that created some, shall we say, complicated family dynamics.
I'm sure it did.
Yeah.
But remember, this wasn't just about romance.
Right?
By marrying into the lineage of Cyrus the Great,
Yeah.
the revered founder of the Persian Empire,
Huh?
Darius cleverly linked himself to a powerful legacy.
Right.
It was a strategic move to win over
Yeah.
those who might have been skeptical of his claim.
Genius.
It was-
But marriage alone wouldn't be enough to quell all those rebellions, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Darius was a master of both soft power and brute force.
Oh, wow.
He combined strategic marriages with ruthless military campaigns
I see.
to crush any opposition
Right.
and to solidify his narrative.
Yeah.
He commissioned the Behistun inscription,
The Behistun inscription.
a massive trilingual monument carved into a mountainside.
Ah, yes. I've seen pictures of that.
You have.
It's like ancient propaganda on a grand scale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The inscription tells Darius's version of events,
Yeah.
justifying his rise to power
Right.
and portraying him as the rightful heir.
I see.
It's a fascinating example of how ancient rulers used art and language
Yeah.
to shape their image and influence public perception.
So he's a warrior king.
He is.
a master strategist,
Uh-huh.
and a bit of a spin doctor, too.
A bit.
This Darius guy sounds like a real piece of work.
He was.
Yeah.
But remember, we're getting just one side of the story. The Behistun inscription is Darius's version of events.
Yeah.
And it's likely that his opponents had a different perspective.
Always important to consider multiple viewpoints.
Always.
Yeah, but even his enemies couldn't deny that Darius was a formidable force.
That's right.
So how did he want the world to see him? What kind of image did he project?
Well, interestingly,
Yeah.
Darius was the first Persian king to be depicted in art.
Really?
We don't have any images of his predecessors,
Oh, wow.
Cyrus or Cambyses.
I see.
So Darius really set the standard for royal imagery.
So what's the classic Darius look?
Think long flowing robes,
Okay.
a perfectly groomed beard,
Yeah.
often holding a scepter, a symbol of his authority.
Mm-hmm.
He's usually depicted in a powerful stance,
Right.
sometimes standing triumphantly over his enemies.
Classic kingly stuff.
It is.
But was it all just a facade? Was there more to Darius than just this carefully crafted image?
Luckily for us,
Yeah.
Darius left some clues about his personality
Okay.
in his own word.
In his own words.
His tomb inscription,
Oh,
for
yeah.
example, gives us a glimpse into how he saw himself.
Ooh. Juicy details from the tomb.
There are...
Tell us more.
He boasts about his skills as a warrior,
Okay.
a spearman,
Uh-huh.
a bowman,
Yeah.
a horseman,
Okay.
the whole package.
Wow.
But he also highlights his more thoughtful qualities,
Really?
claiming that he's a deliberate ruler who carefully weighs his options.
I see.
He even emphasizes his fairness,
Oh, wow.
claiming that he only passes judgment after hearing all sides of a story.
So he's painting a picture of himself as a wise and just ruler.
That's right.
But was that really the case?
That's the question.
Yeah, actions speak louder than words, right?
That's right. We have these grand pronouncements from Darius himself,
Uh-huh.
but how did his actions match up to his words?
Right.
One particularly telling detail comes from Babylonian records.
Okay.
It seems there was this notorious crook named Jimilu
Bimilu.
who was basically getting away with everything until Darius came along.
Oh, I see where this is going. Sounds like Gimelu's days of scamming were numbered.
You got it. Oh, around the time Darius solidified his power,
Mm-hmm.
Gimilu suddenly vanishes from the records.
Really?
Coincidence? I think not.
So this wise and just ruler
Right.
wasn't afraid to crack down on those who challenged his authority.
It seems that way.
He clearly took his law and order thing seriously.
He did.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
fact, he was obsessed with law and order.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't just confined to Persia.
Okay.
You see it reflected in the language of the time.
Really?
The old Persian word for law, data,
Boda.
starts popping up in sources from all over the empire.
Wow.
Greek, Hebrew, Babylonian.
So his influence extended beyond just conquering territory.
It did.
He was shaping legal systems across cultures.
It seems that way.
Why?
It suggests that Darius's emphasis on justice and order
Yeah.
wasn't just about controlling his own people.
Right.
He saw it as a universal principle.
Right.
Something that should be applied throughout his vast domain.
Okay, so we've got a warrior, a lawgiver,
We do.
and now it seems he was also a devout believer.
He was.
Tell us about his religious beliefs.
Darius was a follower of Ahura Mazda,
Ahura Mazda.
the chief god in the Zoroastrian faith. This god represented wisdom, justice, and truth.
Okay.
And Darius saw himself as a champion of these values.
Mm,
He even saw a connection between his own name,
really?
Darius,
Wow.
which means upholding the good,
Wow.
and his role as king.
So it was like his destiny to bring order and righteousness to the world.
That seems to be how he saw it.
Yeah.
His religious beliefs weren't just a private matter.
Wow.
They were intertwined with his political ideology and his
Wow.
vision for the empire.
This is getting really interesting.
It is.
We've got this complex figure.
We do.
A warrior,
Yeah.
a lawgiver,
Uh-huh.
a devout believer,
Yes.
all wrapped up in one incredibly ambitious king.
He was that...
But how did he actually govern this massive empire?
Right.
It stretched from India to Greece.
Yeah.
How did he keep everything running smoothly?
That's where his administrative genius comes in.
Okay.
Darius wasn't just a conqueror.
Right.
He was a brilliant organizer and innovator.
I see.
He completely overhauled the tax system,
The tax system.
which, as you can imagine, wasn't the most popular move. But he cleverly rebranded it,
Okay.
calling it tribute or even a gift
Really?
to make it sound less burdensome.
Smart marketing.
It was.
But did everyone have to pay up?
Interestingly, Persia itself
Persia itself.
The heartland of the empire was exempt from taxes.
Wow. Talk about a nice perk for the home team.
It was.
I bet that made him pretty popular back home.
I imagine so.
But what about those far-flung corners of the empire?
That's where his infrastructure projects come in.
Okay.
Darius built an incredible road system
Really?
with service stations every few hundred miles. Think of it as the 5th century BCE version of rest stops along a highway.
So couriers could zip across the empire.
They could.
Delivering messages and keeping those trade routes humming.
Exactly. It was a logistical marvel that allowed him to maintain communication and control over this vast territory.
Right.
And to streamline things even further,
Uh-huh.
he adopted Aramaic as the universal language for bureaucracy.
Aramaic.
Yes.
So a scribe in Turkey could read a report from a tax collector in Afghanistan.
Precisely.
Wow.
It was like having a common language for government and commerce,
Yeah.
making the empire much more efficient to run.
Okay, so we've got a skilled warrior,
Yes.
a cunning politician,
Uh-huh.
a devout believer,
That's right.
and an administrative genius.
He was all those things.
This Darius guy was quite the multitasker.
He was.
But of course, no reign lasts forever.
Right.
And as we all know, there's that little thing called the Persian Wars,
The Persian Wars.
looming on the horizon.
Yes, but before we dive into that,
Okay.
let's not forget about Darius's other ambitions.
Yeah.
Particularly his campaigns in India.
Right.
He added a significant chunk of India to the empire, bringing in vast wealth and resources.
Wow.
So this wasn't just some small-time operation on the fringes of Greece.
Right.
This was a king with global ambitions.
This is why I love these deep dives.
I do too.
You start to see history from a completely different angle.
That's right.
But, okay, I'm dying to hear about those Greek mishaps.
We'll get there.
What led to the showdown between Darius and those plucky Athenians?
Well, let's just say things started heating up
Okay.
in the western edge of the empire,
Uh-huh.
an area that, frankly, wasn't that high on Darius's priority list,
Right.
but a series of events,
Okay.
including a revolt in Ionia,
Yeah.
would eventually lead to one of the most famous battles in history, the Battle of Marathon.
All right, folks, we're about to step onto the battlefield.
We are.
But we'll have to save that epic clash for part 2 of our Darius deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the life and times of Darius the Great.
Before the break, we were just about to delve into the events
Yeah.
that led to the epic clash at Marathon.
That's right. It's one of those battles
Yeah.
that has captured the imagination for centuries.
Right.
This underdog story of the Athenian army facing down the mighty Persian Empire.
But as we've been learning,
Right.
it's crucial to see these events through Darius's eyes,
Absolutely.
to understand his motivations and his priorities.
Exactly. For Darius, it all began with the Ionian Revolt.
The Ionian Revolt.
These Greek cities in Asia Minor,
Uh-huh.
under Persian control,
Okay.
decided to rebel,
Wow.
and they got some support from mainland Greece, including Athens.
So essentially Athens poked the bear.
You could say that.
Yeah.
For Darius, this was a direct challenge to his authority,
I see.
a slap in the face that he couldn't ignore.
So it wasn't just about putting down a minor uprising. It was about sending a message.
Absolutely. He wanted to show the world, and especially those rebellious Greeks, that challenging the Persian Empire had serious consequences.
Okay, but wasn't there also a strategic element to this?
Yeah.
I mean, didn't Darius see an opportunity
Possibly.
to expand his empire further westward into mainland Greece?
That's certainly a possibility. We know that Darius was ambitious,
Yeah.
and he was always looking for ways to expand his power.
Right.
It's likely that he saw the Ionian Revolt as an opening
Yeah.
to bring those independent Greek city-states under his control.
So the stage is set
It is.
for this epic clash of civilizations.
Right.
The mighty Persian Empire versus those feisty Greeks.
They were feisty.
How did Darius plan to conquer this new territory?
Oh.
Did he send a massive army, like something out of the movie 300?
Well, not quite.
Yeah.
The force he sent was actually relatively small,
Wow.
probably composed largely of mercenaries.
Mercenaries. So not even Darius's best troops. It sounds like he might have underestimated those Greeks.
It's possible, remember, from his perspective,
Yeah.
this was a minor distraction,
I see.
a sideshow compared to his larger goals in the East.
It makes you wonder, what if those Greek mishaps hadn't happened?
It does.
Could Darius have focused more of his energy
Possibly.
and resources on expanding into India, for example?
It's a fascinating what-if scenario.
Yeah.
We know he had grand ambitions in that direction.
Right.
And who knows what he might have achieved
Yeah.
if he hadn't been bogged down in Greece.
Right.
But history, as we know, is full of twists and turns.
All right, let's get back to the action.
Okay.
The Persian fleet sets sail.
They do.
And their first stop is Eretria,
In Retria.
a Greek city on the island of Euboea.
Right.
What happens there?
They attack and successfully sack the city.
Wow.
This was probably intended as a show of force,
Uh-huh.
a way to intimidate the Athenians.
And I bet it gave those Persian mercenaries a nice confidence boost.
I imagine so.
So they set sail for Athens,
They do.
land at Marathon.
Yes.
And then what? Give us the battle blow by blow.
The Athenians, though outnumbered,
Yeah.
were determined to defend their city.
Right.
They knew that if the Persians took Marathon,
Yeah.
Athens would be next.
This is where that legendary Athenian runner, Pheidippides,
Phoenicianism?
right?
Yes.
the guy who supposedly ran all the way to Sparta to ask for help.
Exactly. Though, unfortunately for the Athenians,
Yeah.
the Spartans were a bit preoccupied with a religious festival
Oh, no.
and couldn't lend a hand.
So the Athenians were essentially on their own.
They were.
Talk about pressure.
I know.
Facing down the might of the Persian Empire with no backup.
Right.
What happened next?
Well, against all odds,
Uh-huh.
the Athenians launched a daring attack
Wow.
and completely routed the Persian forces.
Really?
It was a stunning victory for the Greeks
Wow.
and a humiliating defeat for Darius.
So those plucky Athenians,
Yes,
outnumbered and outgunned,
they were.
sent the mighty Persians packing.
They did.
That's incredible.
It is. And for the Athenians,
Yeah.
this victory became a defining moment in their history, a symbol of their courage and resilience.
Right.
It's no wonder they celebrated it by having Pheidippides run all the way back to Athens
Right.
to announce the victory.
Of course. That's where we get the idea of the marathon race.
Exactly.
So that's where that comes from. But back to Darius.
Okay.
How did he react to this defeat?
Wow.
Was he furious? Did he immediately start planning a massive counterattack?
Well, the sources are a bit unclear on his immediate reaction.
I see.
We do know that he began assembling a massive force
Okay.
for another invasion of Greece,
Yeah.
but he died before he could carry out his plans.
So marathon might have been a minor distraction for Darius.
Right.
But it clearly stung.
Yes, I'm sure it did.
Yeah.
No ruler likes to be defeated.
Right.
Especially by a force they consider inferior.
It makes you wonder,
Yeah,
did this defeat change Darius's thinking at all?
that's a great question.
Did he learn any lessons from this Greek mishap?
It's certainly possible that Marathon made him more cautious,
Yeah.
more aware of the potential for resistance,
Uh-huh.
even from those he considered less powerful.
And his successors,
Right.
especially his son, Xerxes,
Yes.
would eventually take up the torch, so to speak,
Right.
and launch that massive invasion of Greece.
Yes. Xerxes was determined to avenge his father's defeat
Yeah.
and finally conquer Greece.
So the seeds of those epic clashes,
Yes.
the ones that inspired countless movies and history books,
Right.
were sown during Darius's reign.
They were.
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves,
Right.
let's circle back to Darius's legacy.
Okay.
What lasting impact did he have on Persia and the wider world?
Well, he left behind a remarkable legacy,
Mhm.
one that continues to be debated and analyzed by historians today.
I can imagine.
He was a complex figure,
Oh.
a warrior king who ruthlessly expanded his empire,
Right.
but also a skilled administrator
Yeah.
who built roads,
Uh-huh.
standardized languages,
Right.
and created a system of laws
Yeah.
that promoted order and justice.
It's that duality that makes him so fascinating.
It is.
He was both a brutal conqueror
Yeah.
and a savvy ruler who, in many ways,
Yeah.
laid the foundation for the Persian Empire's long-lasting success.
Exactly. It's too simplistic to label him as simply a good or bad king.
Right.
His story forces us to grapple with the complexities of
Mhm.
leadership,
Mhm.
power,
Right.
and the legacies that rulers leave behind.
So how should we remember Darius the Great?
I think.
As a ruthless tyrant, a brilliant innovator,
Right.
or something in between?
Perhaps the best way to remember him
Yeah.
is as a product of his time,
Uh-huh.
a ruler who embodied both the brutal realities
Yeah.
and the remarkable achievements of ancient empires.
Wow.
His story reminds us that history is rarely black and white,
Right.
but rather a tapestry of conflicting narratives and perspectives.
It's all about nuance and trying to understand the past on its own terms.
It is.
But before we wrap up our deep dive into Darius's world,
Okay.
there's one more fascinating aspect of his reign that I'd love to explore.
Right.
We've talked about his military campaigns,
We have.
his administrative skills,
Right.
even his religious beliefs.
Yes.
But what about his personal life?
Okay.
His relationships? Was he just a cold, calculating king?
Right.
Or was there more to him than that?
That's a great question. And you might be surprised to learn
Okay.
that beyond the battlefield and the halls of power,
Yeah.
Darius had a softer side,
Really?
a deep connection to his family and his faith.
Ooh, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
We can.
But we'll have to say that for part 3 of our Darius deep dive. Welcome back to our exploration of Darius the Great. Before the break, we were talking about Darius's personal life, and you hinted that there was more to this warrior king than meets the eye.
That's right. We often picture these ancient rulers as distant, almost mythical figures. But they were also human beings with families and emotions and personal struggles.
Right.
And Darius is a particularly interesting case.
Yeah.
Because we have some glimpses into his personal life
Okay.
that go beyond just the political and military narratives.
So what can you tell us about Darius, the family man?
Well,
Was he a loving husband and father?
it's likely a bit of both.
Okay.
Remember, he married those women from the previous royal family for political reasons
Right.
to consolidate his claim to the throne.
Uh-huh.
But there's also evidence that he genuinely cared for his wives and children.
What kind of evidence? Give us the juicy details.
For instance, we have inscriptions and reliefs that depict Darius with his wife, Atossa, daughter of Cyrus the Great.
I see.
She's often shown by his side,
Yeah.
not just in formal ceremonies, but also in more intimate settings.
Lily.
This suggests that their relationship went beyond just a political arrangement.
So maybe there was some genuine affection there.
It's certainly possible, and we know that Darius had several sons who played important roles in his administration.
I see.
One of his sons, Xerxes,
Okay.
would eventually succeed him as king.
Right.
This suggests that Darius saw his family as integral to his legacy,
Uh-huh.
not just as pawns in a political game.
That makes sense. Family was everything in those days,
It was.
especially for rulers. But we also talked about Darius's faith being a big part of his life. How did that personal faith manifest itself?
Well, as a follower of Zoroastrianism,
Right.
Darius believed in Ahura Mazda,
Yeah.
the god of truth and justice,
Uh-huh.
and this belief permeated his entire worldview.
Wow.
He saw himself as a divinely appointed ruler,
I see.
tasked with upholding order and righteousness throughout his empire.
So for him, it wasn't just about conquering territory.
Right.
It was about fulfilling a sacred duty.
Exactly. And this is reflected in many of his inscriptions and building projects.
Okay.
For example, the famous Persepolis, his grand ceremonial capital,
Yeah.
was designed to showcase the glory of the Persian Empire.
Mm-hmm.
And the divine favor bestowed upon Darius.
So in a way, his personal faith shaped his entire approach to leadership.
It seems that way.
It's like his relationship with Ahura Mazda gave him the confidence and the justification for his actions.
That's a great insight. Darius believed he was acting in accordance with divine will, spreading truth and justice throughout the world.
This really paints a more nuanced picture of Darius.
He does.
We see him not just as a ruthless conqueror,
Right.
but as a man driven by a deep sense of duty,
Yes.
both to his family and to his God. It makes him a much more relatable.
It does. Even sympathetic figure.
I agree. It reminds us that even the most powerful rulers are still human beings,
Yeah.
shaped by their beliefs, their relationships, and their own personal struggles.
All right, so we've explored Darius's rise to power,
We have.
his military campaigns,
Right.
his administrative genius, his religious beliefs,
Yes.
and even his personal life.
Right.
What's the big takeaway from our deep dive
Wow.
into the life and times of Darius the Great? I think Darius' story reminds us that history is never simple.
Right.
We can't just label historical figures as good or bad.
Yeah.
We have to try to understand them in all their complexity to see the world through their eyes.
Well said. Darius was a product of his time,
He
a
was.
time of great empires, brutal warfare, and profound religious beliefs.
That's right.
He was a warrior, a builder, a lawgiver, a family man, and a devout believer.
He was all of those.
And his story, with all its twists and turns,
Right?
gives us a fascinating glimpse into a pivotal moment in human history.
It does. And for anyone who wants to learn more about Darius and the world of ancient Persia,
Yeah.
I highly recommend Professor Lloyd Llewellyn-Jones's book, Persians, The Age of the Great Kings.
Absolutely. It's a great read.
It is.
And that brings us to the end of our Darius the Great deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey back in time. We'll be back next time with another fascinating exploration of history, so be sure to subscribe and stay tuned.